welcome to ProtPilot. My name is Darren, and today we're going to be doing part 2 of our comparison to Figma and ProtoPie by building a basic login. So if you haven't seen part 1, go and check that out, because we'll be picking straight up where we left off. So we're going to start in Figma, and just to remind everybody, if you've already watched part 1 of the video, so we created our logo animation, so our application starts. We then faded in our login form, and we made sure that the username field had focus by bringing the keyboard up. So we can actually just run that just to familiarize ourselves. So animate in, login form fades in, and keyboard comes up. Okay. So the next part is we want to prototype the input of the username and the password. And we're going to introduce an error state just so we can kind of see how we might do that. So there's going to be, from a user flow perspective, the user's going to enter their username, their password, they're going to hit the go button, an error is going to happen, there's going to be a mismatch of information, they're going to go back, remove the password, enter a new password, and then successfully log in. So let's see how we do that. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this frame, and just going to connect these two together. So this state effectively is the keyboard up. So the next thing we want to do is enter the username information. Now in Figma we don't have real keyboards, we have fake keyboards, so we're mimicking the input of information on the keyboard. So all we can really do is allow the user to tap on the keyboard graphic. So with my keyboard graphic selected, I'm just going to go into prototype mode. I'm going to drag the pick whip to my next frame, and here I'm going to add the value. Again, because we can't really type on a real keyboard, we're essentially doing an on rails representation of this user flow. So I'm just going to change the color to that black. Okay, and I'm just going to change the name. Okay. So that's all good. What I also want to do is I want to focus the password input. So we're going to do the same as we did here. We're just going to put a fake cursor, just using the pipe symbol, single pipe symbol. And I'm just going to make that black. Okay, so that should complete our next state. If we just come back to the keyboard in prototyping mode, and we're just going to have a look at the prototyping values. So we've got on tap, which is what we want. So when we tap, we can tap anywhere on this graphic. It's going to navigate to this next screen, and it's going to be an instant animation, which again is what we want because we're just mimicking the inputting of information. All we're really doing is switching from this value to this value. So we can have a look at that. So I come in, I've already got my username field in focus, so I just tap the keyboard and it inputs my username and switches me to the password field, so that looks good. back to our file. So the next state, again, I want to duplicate this time duplicate my input frame. So each time as we go along, we're just duplicating the previous frame so we can keep that narrative, that journey ongoing and everything correct. Okay, so again, we're going to use the keyboard to make sure in prototyping mode we're going to connect our two frames together. And this time we're going to mimic the input of the password. So I'm just going to put in some dots. Okay. And let's just double check. Again, on tap, navigate to an instant. Absolutely fine. Let's preview that. Okay, that's good. Okay, so we now got our login form inputted, successfully completed. So we're now going to hit the go button to try and log in. So again, duplicate. This time we're going to, I'll say this time. So again, we're just going to connect the keyboard to the frame because we're effectively going to be pressing the go button. You could, if you wanted to, have a special rectangle around it, but I don't think it's really necessary. People will probably try and tap the go button because it's all active. It will feel like it's responding to the button that they're tapping, as far as you can achieve in this software. So this time we're going to, I've just got some pre-prepared, so I'm just going to grab this graphic over here. And this time we're going to just remove the keyboard out of the frame, and we're going to add our error state. So I'm going to hit the go button and it's going to navigate to this error state. Now on the animation, so on tap is fine, so instead of instant, I'm going to go to Smart Animate, because I want the keyboard to animate out and I want this to fade in. So let's just preview that, see what that looks like. Okay, so the keyboard kind of faded in, it didn't move down, so let's just check to see what happened there. So this is what happens sometimes when you pull a graphic off of your frame, it actually takes it out of the frame, so it needs to be in the frame for it to be recognized. So we just need to grab our keyboard and put it in the frame. And the way you know that is that if you could see the keyboard when it's off the frame, outside the boundaries of the frame, then it's not in the frame. If it's off frame and it's actually in the group, it will disappear like it has there. So let's just try that again. Okay, so now the keyboard animates off. Okay, looks good. Okay, so we're going to duplicate this frame. Let's just, in fact, we don't need this. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. So just to go through what's happened. So I've hit the go button. I've got an error because it's a login, and from a security perspective, we don't want to tell the user which value is wrong. So we bring up this message that communicates that one of those values is incorrect. So we're going to assume the password field is incorrect. So the next thing I need to do is I need to get the keyboard back up. So I need to be able to select this input field to change the value. So we're going to select the password field and we're going to connect that to the next frame. And we're going to bring our keyboard back up. And we're going to make the interaction on, just make sure I've got them right. Yeah. So just make sure you've got the input field selected, not the actual frame, because there's two potential points there. We've got the one where we're actually tapping on the frame, and it's already got Smart Animate selected, so that's good. So that's going to bring the keyboard back up. And we're also going to want to, actually no, we're going to do that in the next frame. So that's all we're doing for this frame. We're going to now duplicate this frame again. And on here, I'm going to tap the delete button on the frame. And again, I'm not going to localize the interaction to that button. I'm just going to make the whole keyboard interactive. So I'm going to connect these two frames together. And that's effectively going to remove all of the values. And then I'm going to duplicate it again. And this time I'm going to add my new password field. So I'm going to connect these two together. And again, I'm just going to mimic. Let's a bit bigger. I'm just going to mimic a password. This time we want it to be successful, so we can bring in our final frame. And on this one, I'm going to change the animation to a dissolve. Actually, no, I'm going to move in. Let's use move in. So you can just see down here, you get a little preview of all the different transitions that Figma gives you. So choose the one. In fact, sliding looks like a good choice. I'm going to choose sliding. And when you choose a transition, especially these ones down here where they're moving from left to right in one way, shape or form, you've got the control of changing the direction in which they move. So we're going to leave it at the default, which is sliding from right to left, but if you was going back a screen, you'd want to change it to coming from left to right. Okay. So that should be our whole prototype completed. So let's just double check those last few screens because we didn't preview these last few screens. So let's just go back to our error screen. So I've got my error screen. I need to tap to activate the keyboard. I need to actually here, I think I'll put the cursor in because that's the only thing we've got that's kind of telling the user that they've activated that focus of that field. So we can do it like that. Let's go back to here. Okay, that feels a bit more natural. I'm now going to remove the value. I'm going to type a new value. Okay, so we've got an error here. Let's just go back and check here what we got. So I've connected it to the wrong thing. I needed to connect it to the keyboard. So I just need to remove the interaction from here and actually add it to the keyboard. That's what happens when you don't test. So on tap, navigate, and we want that to be instant. Let's run that again. Add the value. And then we're going to hit go to try our luck on our new login credentials. And we successfully log in. And we've got a personalized message here. It's not really personalized. Obviously we need to pre-roll that because in Figma we don't have anything like variables or any way to actually grab user input and present it to the screen. So if we just restart that the whole prototype, so we animate in, we type our username, we autofocus to the password field, we type our password in, we're going to hit go to try and log in, but we're going to get an error. We're going to retry another password, so we're going to select the password field, we're going to remove our first attempt, and we're going to add our second attempt, and we're going to try and log in again, and this time we successfully log in. Okay, so this completes the basic login prototype from the Figma side. So this is how you can use Figma to get a good sense of how your design's working. Obviously you don't have advanced features like user input and the ability to make real decisions. That's where ProtPie comes in, and that's what we're going to be looking at when we do the second half of this prototype in ProtPie in the next section. Hi, so in this next section we're going to look at completing our basic login inside of ProtPie. So we're going to mimic what we've just looked at within Figma. So I just want to refresh your memory of what we did in part 1 inside of ProtPie. So in the same way to Figma, we built the upload, the initial animation of the logo, and then the showing of the form, and then the focus of the username field. So let me just run this in the preview menu. Okay, so that's what we've got so far. So now what we want to do is we want to do the same thing. We want to build in some conditional logic. So in ProtPie we've got conditional logic, so we're going to actually be able to compare the password to a right or wrong answer, and if it's a wrong answer we're going to show the error message, and if it's the right answer we're going to log into the next scene. Additionally, we're going to make the prototype a little bit more personalized, so we're going to grab the value of the username and we're going to pass that to a text field, a text label I should say, on the login screen, so we can show the user's real name. So let's get cracking. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import our other graphics. So what I normally do is I normally just create so here is your scenes. So I'm just going to create a new scene. I'm just going to call this import. And I typically do this to just import graphics in a separate scene so that I don't kind of mess up my layers in my kind of prototype scenes. So I'm going to have that scene selected. And I'm going to go to import Figma, and I'm going to choose the login screen because that's just to flip to Figma. So the login screen is where I want to grab this graphic, and I also want to grab this whole page. So we're going to do the login bit first. So let's grab that. Again, import size is 3x, which matches my prototype inside of ProtPie. Okay, so all I want from this import is this error message, so I'm just going to copy that and paste that into my into my scene. And this is coming as a group, and it's got a text object which is essentially an image, because so it can preserve the font and the type styling. And we've just got an image which is the background. So that's our error message group. I'm just going to turn the opacity down for that because we don't want that to show yet. So I'm going to set the opacity to 0. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another scene, and I'm going to call this home. I'm going to move it next to my scene 1, which I'll call login. Okay. Go back to my import scene. Just going to select all and remove everything. In fact, I can actually import my home graphics in home because there's nothing currently imported. So go to Figma, and this time I'm going to choose home, import. Okay, so I've got my home screen imported. So let's just have a quick look at what we've got. So we've got the tab bar, which is all the way down here. So we need to move that into the correct position. So it's going to move that to the bottom of our screen. And we want to keep the tab bar hierarchically at the top of our layers list, so that anything that navigates underneath it, anything that animates, will come from underneath it and not over the top of it. We've got our welcome message, which I'm just going to convert to text because we want to pass a specific value into this welcome message. And then finally we've got our list, which we want to make scrollable. So what we're going to do is we're going to just change the size of it. So we want the bounding box of the scrollable list to match our viewable area within our phone screen. So that's the first thing we need to do. And then if we come down into the right hand contextual panel and we choose scroll, and by default it will give us a vertical direction, which is what we want. We can also clip sublayers here just so we can see exactly what we're going to see, in the sense of if we unclip it we wouldn't see this underneath here anyway, but it's a bit messy, so it just gives us kind of more of an indication of exactly what we're going to see when we scroll. So if we just preview that, we can see we've got this scrollable view. Now what you can do is if we just unclip that for a second and then we preview it, we can see that actually it's not clipped now, so it scrolls off the top of the screen. So I think we might keep it like that just for the sake of this prototype. Okay, so everything here is kind of prepared for when we have our successful login, so we're kind of done with this screen. So now we're going to move back to our login screen. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to create the conditional logic that looks into the values of the username and the password. So for the sake of this prototype, we're just going to put our conditional logic around the password value. We're not going to worry about the username value. And we're just going to basically add a trigger. So what we're looking for is we're looking to, when the user types the value in of this username and the password, so specifically for the password field, we just want to see what that value is. We want to look at that value at a particular point in time, effectively when the user presses go on the keyboard. So our trigger is going to be the return key for the keyboard, and we're going to select which input field we want that keyboard to trigger. So it's going to be the password field. So when the password field has focus, therefore the keyboard is directly related to the password field. We want to add a condition, and we want to look at the password field's text property, and we want to see if it's equal to a value. So you can make anything up. So if I'm just going to set the successful password value to, what can I use? Let's set it to Han Solo. Okay, so when the return key is pressed, this condition is going to say, is the text of the password field equal to Han Solo, all lowercase, all one word? And if that's true, we're going to use a jump response. So jump responses are what we use to navigate from scene to scene. So we're going to choose a jump response, and we're going to say we want to navigate to the home scene. And we've got some built-in transitions within ProtPie, so these will be familiar to you in a similar way to what you have available inside of Figma. There's not a one-to-one mapping, but there are some similar ones. So we're going to use slide in, the same as we did in Figma, and we're going to keep that to the default, which is right to left. Okay, so this is our successful condition. We now need to create our unsuccessful condition. So we're going to add another condition, and again we're going to look at the password field's text property, and this time we're going to use a different, these are called operators, so we're going to use a different operator which is not equal to. So that's the one with the cross through the equal to, and again we're going to put Han Solo in. And basically what this is going to do is going to say, as if the value of the password field equals anything other than Han Solo, then obviously it's going to be wrong, and we're going to have an error state. So our error state is going to be showing our error message. So if you select the error message first in the layers palette, when we add our response, it will be automatically selected. So we're going to select opacity. And you can see here, it's been automatically selected, and that's because we selected it before we added the response. And we're going to set the opacity to 100. Now there's a whole bunch of different things you could do here from an animation perspective. You have lots of different easing curves, and you've got lots of different interpolators as well of those easing kind of presets. So I'm just going to leave it for now. I'm just going to leave it basic just to sort of match what we did in Figma. Okay, so let's just review. When the user hits the return key for the password field, we're going to check if the value of that password field equals Han Solo, and if it's true, we're going to jump to the home scene, and that'll be a successful login. But if it doesn't equal Han Solo, we're not going to jump to the next scene. We're going to increase the opacity of the error message and show the error message. Okay, so let's run that and see if that works. So I'm going to type a value in my first field, then I'm going to tab to my next field, and I'm going to type in something else, something other than Han Solo. So let's put in Chewbacca, and I'm going to hit the return key. And as we can see, Chewbacca is not the right password, so it's showing me the error states. That's all working. That's the error side of things. If we rerun the prototype, and this time put in the correct password, we've navigated successfully into login. So looks like all our conditional logic is working as expected. But if I just rerun that and we go to the password field, obviously you can see my password, which obviously you can do if you want to do. Most password fields are masked. So within ProtPie we can do that also. So if we just select our password field in the layers panel, and if we just navigate down in the context panel all the way down to keyboard options, we've got some different keyboards we can use. So we've got text, URL, email, number, text password, and number password. So we're going to use text password because our password is all text. We're going to leave the rest at its default, so we're still going to keep the return key to say go. You can change the value of the return key text to these different things. We're going to leave it as go. You can also change iOS, if it's on an iOS device, from light to a dark theme. We're just going to leave it as light. And if we now go back to running our prototype, and we type it in and then come in and put in my password, you now can't see it, it's being masked. So now that matches the way we had the mask value inside of Figma. And again, if I hit return, successful password, so I've been logged in. Now at the moment, our kind of personalized message at the top here is static, so it's not connected to the username field at all. That's just what I put into my graphics. So we can make that dynamic as well. So let's look at how we do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a variable. So variables are accessed in the bottom left hand corner here, and there's a few different types of variables that we can create within ProtPie. And as far as accessing the variables, there's two different types that we can use. So we have for all scenes and we have just for this scene. Now, because we're using multiple scenes and we want to have access to the variable value in the other scene, we need to choose for all scenes. So I'll create a variable, and over here in the right hand panel you can see there's three different types of variables. There's number variables, text variables, and color variables. So we want to change this to a text variable. And we're just going to rename this name. Okay, so we need to now take the value of the input field of username, and we need to pass it into this variable for safekeeping, so we can then use it in our second screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to add that in our return trigger. So we just need some way of triggering the adding of the value. So we might as well use the return trigger. That's absolutely fine. And we can actually just add it outside of the condition. So no matter what condition, actually, well, let's add it inside the successful condition inside of here. So if we add it inside the successful condition, to add another response inside of this condition, we just need to hover over here. You'll see this little plus button, and we're going to assign, and we're going to assign a value to our name variable, and then we're going to need to tell it what that value is going to be. So we need to create a formula for this. So we're going to hit the FX button on the right hand side, and we need to tell it where we're going to get this value from. So we're going to get it from the username field, so we're going to choose username, and then we need to tell it what property of the username we want to grab. We want to grab text, and we're going to click OK. Okay, so when the return key gets hit, if the condition is successful, if we've put in the right password, we're going to assign the value that the user types into the username field, and we're going to assign that to this variable, this name variable, for safekeeping. And because it's a global variable, it's going to stay in there for the life cycle of the running of the prototype. It's going to assign the value, and then it's going to jump to the next scene as we've previously already seen. So that's the first part. The second part is we need to now use that variable. So we're going to jump over to home, and we're going to add a start trigger. And this time we're going to do start with jump because we want the value to be added before the screen gets rendered. So start with jump basically does all the things you put, all the responses you put in the start trigger will be actioned before the screen loads. And we're going to, let's just double check, yeah, we've made that a text. Just make sure that is a text field. So we did convert that. And we're going to use the text property. And you can see it's already chosen the text message because we had it selected by default. And we're going to choose the formula option under content because we basically need to create the message from the variable and some text. We still wanted to say welcome, and we want to grab the name as well, or the value. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add the welcome bit. So to do that, we need to type in the word, and we're going to put a space in, and this is effectively the space between the two words because the value in the variable won't have any spaces in it, so we need to add that here. And then we're going to add a plus because we're going to add, and we're going to add our name. Okay, so in the text field, we're going to type welcome plus name. Okay, looks good. So let's go back to our login scene and run our prototype. So we get our animation, we get our form popping in. I'm going to type my name in here. So let me type something different. Let's type pen. And we're going to put in our correct password, and when we hit return, you can see we've been successfully logged in and we've passed the username value from the input field across two scenes into our personalized message at the top of our screen. Okay, so this completes the part 2 of looking at the comparisons of Figma and ProtoPie. So in this second section, you've seen how ProtPie really brings some more advanced features to your prototyping capabilities. So Figma is a great tool for doing basic flows and doing basic prototypes. You've seen how it's relatively simple to bring your graphics from Figma into ProtPie. So both tools really work quite well together. But you can also see how we've created this prototype in ProtPie and how it's compared. So we have used scenes, which compares to some way to the frames that Figma uses, but you can also see how you do a lot of work in ProtPie within a scene, and you can see here how we've used conditional logic, we've used real input fields and real values to make this a really believable experience. And you've also seen how we've effectively compartmentalized our prototype into separate scenes. So we're using scenes just to break some of the things down. This has enabled us to just keep some of our logic in compartmentalized, like I said, in another scene, but it's also enabled us to take advantage of these built-in transitions that you have inside of ProtPie, which again map to, in some ways, to the transitions that you have inside of Figma. So I hope this has given you a good insight into the two tools and how they compare from how you do things. If you've been used to doing prototyping in Figma, I hope this will give you a good idea about how you can take those existing skills and take maybe your first steps into doing some prototyping inside of ProtPie. And also, if you're completely new to prototyping in Figma, hopefully I've given you a little bit of insight on how you can get the ball rolling and start to bake some prototyping into your design workflow. Prototyping is a key part of the product design workflow. We should all be doing it. We should all be doing it often for testing against our assumptions against users, and also being able to understand how we want a product to really work with animation and interaction design as well. So hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.